Hello, welcome to another episode of the State of Politics. It's just the two of us today on this Tuesday afternoon, so you're stuck with us. We've got no guests, but big thanks to Kevin and Angela who we've had on the past couple of weeks and everybody else that's joined us so far. Everything's still a bit up in the air. Parliament's not fully back to normal yet, but we'll get there and hopefully we'll get another group of guests on to talk all things Scottish, British, European, international politics. Patrick, where do you want to kick off today?
Um, well, I think this is meant to be the programme for government week, but because of the deal with the Greens, it's been delayed. There's still, I think, some small technical issues to sort out. But there's an article in the National, I believe, on Sunday night or Monday morning, that it would have included an idea of what a referendum on independence would look like. But as I say, it's delayed till next week, so we won't get those details anytime soon. But we could talk about the Greens first, if you want. That was confirmed on Friday, wasn't it?
Yes, but we saw the press conference initially with Nicola Sturgeon, Patrick Harvey, and Lorna Slater the week before that, and then both parties put it to their members, and we got an overall majority in both parties to strike this deal. It's something that we've covered past couple of weeks. We spoke about it. We've obviously had Lorna Slater in the podcast. It was something that you asked her about, and she didn't tell us too much. It's been
I think it came as a surprise to everyone involved, actually.
Yeah, the First Minister today described it as groundbreaking. Do you share those thoughts?
Well, it's certainly a first. It's historic because no Green has ever been in government in the United Kingdom, Scotland, England, Wales, Northern Ireland. So I suppose they have broken new ground in that regard. Quite interesting, the two votes for the party membership. I think the SNP was 95% and the Greens was 82%. So both extremely high. I've seen a few on Twitter unhappy about the posts and slightly concerned that they might be sort of, gestures as opposed to any real power. But I mean, what real power can you have when you've got 7 MSPs and a government of 71, So hopefully they do manage to wield some power in transport. As Fraser said, that's one of the main areas when you need to tackle the climate emergency. Maybe transport. I know Lorna Slater has energy and industry, so I'm hoping after speaking to her that we can see her do a lot of good work there over the next 5 years. But yeah, as you say, a resounding vote of endorsement from their membership and also from the SNP membership. And we've seen SNP figures at 119,000 members. So the rumours that 80% of our members left for the Alapa party is absolute nonsense.
Yeah, don't think Alaba members will be too happy with this deal because although their election slogan was a super majority, this is a super majority. It's the biggest amount of it's the biggest amount of seats that any Scottish government has ever wielded since 1999 in the Scottish Parliament. So it's a big statement. I think it's a big statement in terms of where Scotland's headed to with its politics and where its position is in independence. And with that vote, which obviously stood up in the last session of Parliament right through from 2016 all the way through, it looks as if the Parliament is on this journey again to this second referendum. With COP, it's not far away now at all. That not that far away that even football fixtures have been moved because of it. Do you think at this point in time, yes, it's going to be two Greens in the government, great, but as you say, is there a worry and a concern for a lot of people that it's just that wee token to say thanks for your support through this time, we'll give you two positions, and it's just a gesture? Or do you think that they are going to wield power in government and make positive change? Do you think they can do that?
Well, I think for a government that's had near total control for 14 years, I know they've had to negotiate budgets for 9 of those 14, but near control for 14 years, it's obviously going to be quite difficult to let go of power. So I think it might be challenging at times. But the Greens have been very shrewd budget negotiators in the past 5 years. So I think they'll be more than capable and more than confident of getting a lot of concessions, being around the cabinet meeting desk.
Mm.
I don't think it's a gesture, no, not at all. You know, we both asked Lorna about this potential coalition back in April or May, because I'd seen it happen in New Zealand back in October. The Labour Party won exactly 50% of the seats and could therefore basically govern alone, but they asked two parties to enter coalition with them anyway, one being the Greens and I think one being the sort of native New Zealand party. Forgive me, I can't remember the name. But yeah, I thought there might be something like this. I'm glad that they've managed to agree it now, and I look forward to, transport specifically. Transport could be an important one because you're moving towards a sort of universal free transport with that under 22s free bus travel, ScotRail and public ownership, and I think we're now getting electric only highways in a couple of years' time as well. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. But yeah, exciting times ahead.
In terms of, there's been a lot made of in the SNP, and the SNP, the Scottish Government, missing its climate targets over the past 14 years in government. How do you think the Greens, who are the first party, whenever there's a debate on this, or it comes to motion in Parliament to stand up and say you've missed the target again, how can they as a party influence the government in meeting these targets? Because we saw Greta Thunberg today say that Scotland's not a leading country on climate. How does this step forward change that?
Well, I don't know if it will be effective politics or effective PR, but if they just sort of stand up and tell the truth, basically, the public will be able to tell whether or not we're meeting our targets and whether or not the Greens are exerting any influence. Because if they go into meetings and they're trying to make plans for turning transport green, retrofitting homes, making the planet a more livable environment, and they're not getting what they're wanting, then they can just come out and say that. They're just saying, look, we're not getting any power here, and if worse comes to worse, they can walk away. And what a disaster that would be for both parties. I think that would look really, really bad. Just to go back to COP, actually, I didn't really address the question. I know it's causing chaos for football fans, well, Celtic fans in particular, but and I suppose Ferencváros fans. But I think it's looking like it might paper over cracks at this stage, because you're seeing litter pile up in the streets in Glasgow, while I think it's hundreds of thousands, you'll be able to tell me, hundreds of thousands, if not millions, being wasted on cycle lanes
Millions.
that nobody even uses.
If it's not £1 million, I don't think it's a far sight off it.
I can imagine that, actually, because they do stretch.
And it has caused chaos. And I'm all for moving towards a greener, more renewable system, but the money could have been invested a lot better in actually creating, whether it's wider roads to make sure that's fitted in, because more cars piling up in one lane isn't going to help it.
Just pedestrianise George Square with the same money. I mean, everybody wants it. Who wants to drive around George Square? But yeah, on COP26, I think it's the UK government that are organising it, so it's going to be an absolute chaos fest in that respect. And then whether people like Joe Biden, Boris Johnson, I think we'll have a new German Chancellor by then, in fairness, from the SPD. Whether these world leaders want to set the ambitious targets that are necessary, like Patrick Harvey and others across the world are asking for, I don't know.
No, and on COP, in terms of the city of Glasgow, that's the first I'll touch on what you said there. If the Greens were to walk away from this deal in the next 5 years, I think in terms of the independence cause, it would take a real big hit to it, because it would give the Tory government a lot of ammunition to say, well, wait a minute, the two of you can't agree here. The two biggest pro-independence parties in Scotland can't agree on how to run Scotland at this moment in time. Why do you think you can do it after independence? Which I think would give the unionist side of the argument a lot of ammunition. So this is uncharted waters. It's a territory they've not went into at all.
But if they were to walk away, it would have to become a really, really bad situation for them to both splinter like that. They'd have to really fall out over something.
I can't see it happening. But again, as you say, if it comes to targets and they're getting missed again, the Greens won't want to put their names to this. And if it's not on their part, I can't see them hanging around. On COP, on Glasgow, there's been a lot made about the city hosting this event. And yet, it's a concern from council employees at the city in terms of the mess of it just now. It's actually very visible to see if you walk through Glasgow city centre, through litter, weeds, and whatever else. See the scenes that we saw on Sunday, an anti-Catholic and anti-Irish racist attack of people singing happened during that week of COP. Listen to Professor Sir Tom Devine yesterday in the Nine, who said that it would stain Glasgow's reputation for good. How, in the space of a couple of months here, does something like that be prevented from happening in the city?
The Glasgow City Council do not grant any even remotely questionable processions through their processions committee. That's one way to stop it.
But what if this, what if the team involved supporters are at home and it happens again? Very unlikely, because we know it. Circumstances are very different.
Celtic don't play Rangers that day.
Celtic don't play Rangers that day, and it doesn't really happen as much. Still, maybe happens, but maybe against a Motherwell or whatever else. How does something like this be avoided? Because we hear a lot about Scotland being a multi-diverse country, but there still is this very real, very alive and kicking undertone that is not pleasant one single bit.
Well, it's not open and diverse if we don't stamp out racists walking through the street. I mean, you can't claim to be open and diverse and then just sort of let racists off the hook when they're marching through literally the centre of the city. I mean, this isn't like... It's not like the Botman Newton Mearns or something. It's not East Kilbride. This is like under the Helaman's umbrella, Glasgow Central Station, Argyle Street, and the police are giving them an escort. Now, I know that they have to do that for safety reasons so that they don't start any aggro. They can't go in and start heavy-handing arresting people. Hopefully, in retrospect, they managed to get... I think they could probably get a good 30 or 40 of them, based on the two videos that were widely circulated. I think they could get 30 or 40. On a slightly unrelated point, I've actually seen some people now claim that the videos are doctored and fake. What absolute nonsense that is, because the police have addressed it, Rangers have addressed it, so many different politicians have addressed it, saying that the videos are not fake. Coming back to COP, I think it's all in Scottish Government, Glasgow City Council's hands. I think it'll be... I mean, the fact that the Celtic game's been rescheduled, I think shows that there will be such a heavy police presence you won't be able to move down at, I think is it the Hydro and the SECC it's been held. So the Glasgow City Centre's a fair bit away, but I suppose that'll be where the world leaders are all staying. Pope Francis, Joe Biden.
The Holy Father, I think, is only going to be here for a day or so. I don't even know if don't even think he's going to stay over. But as you say, there'll likely be an area, a kind of boundary from wherever they all are as well, blocked off, so nobody can get in.
And you'll have Secret Service there as well. I mean, you'll have American Secret Service, German probably have a Secret Service, So I think, safety-wise, I think people will be fine. The eyes of the world will be on us, I suppose. But, this is the problem. It actually is Scotland. People don't want to admit this, but we've now seen 3 of these in the space of about 5 months. March, May and August. You've seen these people sing anti-Catholic songs and anti-Irish songs. And the first time around, they totally get away with it. Second time around, I think there was 55 arrests. And we'll see third time around what happens here. But we're, I think, 3 weeks away from 34 anti-Catholic marches going through the city at the one time, on the one day. It is actually part of Scotland. It's what people don't want to admit, and it does need to be stamped out, as opposed to hiding it for a weekend while the American press are here.
Yeah. Why should anything change, as you say, and just hide it for the weekend as if all is well?
Don't change it for 11 days. Change it for the rest of time. Yeah.
And, it's very unlikely that we all see scenes like this while COP is on, because there'll be a very different approach taken. But what you're saying there about the policing of this, should say, it's not something we've seen before. In terms of even the report and the language that came out with the police, and it wasn't as if any of the police officers had actually reported an incident themselves that they were subject to. It's been reported by others.
The police say they were made aware of the video on the Monday,
yes,
despite it being so widely circulated on the Sunday night.
Yes. Paul Sweeney, MSP, put up a tweet talking about the actual song and the context of the song, Lord Carloway, a court case around over 10 years ago. Correct me if I'm wrong, 2009, I think it might have been, something it been 12 years ago. And it was, said to be racist. So the context, and something like when Amir Anwar comes out and speaks about this, I think it's very important that a figure like that's came out and spoke about it. In terms of the context of it, in Scotland, if it would have been anything else, any other group targeted, there would have been rightfully public outrage and dismay that this was happening. But the point you're making is correct. It's just accepted because it's became the norm of the way that Scotland's been built up. Post 19th century Scotland is just absurd. And really, you can change councils, you can change political parties. I don't know how this goes away. I really don't. How does it go away?
I think you've made the first big step where basically every Labour and SNP politician, Patrick Harvie as well, I don't know about all the Green MSPs, but you've got that coalition of about 65% of the vote saying, look, this is anti-Irish racism, and to actually call it that for once is a massive difference, and it's a hell of a start. I think you have to applaud Call It Out, because you don't know what the reaction to stuff like this would be if it's not for their campaign. I know they meet with the Scottish Government all the time. They're constantly posting online. Before the pandemic, they were protesting orange marches that would go past Catholic churches. So I think just opposing it, really. I mean, I worried when Call It Out started that opposing it would rile up the racists and the bigots, but it doesn't seem to be that way. People are now condemning it outright, which is absolutely fantastic. You're saying there about Paul Sweeney. Paul Sweeney called it out at 5 o'clock, and I think this matters because I think the video was posted just before 12, because kick-off was 12, so it had to be before 12. Paul Sweeney called it out at 5 o'clock, and I think just about every SNP MP anywhere near Glasgow called it out at 9:30, 10 o'clock. Now, I'm not going to condemn them for calling it out. Everyone that calls it out is going to be applauded by me because it's the right thing to do, and I'm glad they've done it. But it looks a bit coordinated, a bit orchestrated.
A PR stunt.
Yeah, not. I don't think it's a stunt. I think they genuinely do condemn it. But once a few hours have passed, the media team has deemed it safe or whatever. I think people might call me cynical, but I think I'm probably right.
I would say you're right. There was a collective bunch of SNP, MSPs and MPs who round about the same time and about a half an hour period all put up their tweets.
Yeah, between 9:30 and 10:30.
It wasn't a case that they were on their bed till 8 o'clock at night and then woke up
at 8
to just see it then.
And, journalists, normal people, Celtic fans, Rangers fans, organisations, lawyers, all called it out in the morning and throughout the day. But certain politicians had to wait till the night of the morning after. I just think as soon as you see it, you call it out, and then there's a unified voice. But well done to Paul Sweeney for being one of the first politicians to say something. You're right, it was ruled racist by a judge in 2009. I'm just looking at my notes here. Sectarianism, actually, is one of the things people were calling it. What a load of absolute nonsense. When Tommy Robinson leads racist EDL marches through the streets of Luton or whatever it is he's from, you don't call that sectarian. When there's an Islamophobic attack, it's not sectarian. When there's neo-Nazi terrorist attacks, it's not sectarian, it's racist. It always is racist, and this is no different. And to actually start to tackle the problem, you have to call it what it is. And people immediately calling it sectarianism, like the police statement did actually, is just a joke, to be honest.
Yeah, it seems to be one of the Scotland's favourite terms for some journalists and some politicians, and has been for years. to link that in to 10 years ago when the Offensive Behaviour at Football and Communications Act was first in, 10 years ago, it came in through in 2012, but was, first came to fruition.
Introduced in 2011, yeah.
Yep, introduced in 2011. Saw a tweet from John Nicholson MP, who had a very, poor dig, as if all would be well had this flawed legislation, which was 4 years ago now, I think, 2017 it was repealed.
I think it was 2018, so
2018.
a wee while ago anyway.
It was scrapped. Surely racism, there is enough there through law to tackle it at this point in time, and you don't need a flawed piece of legislation that didn't work.
This is the problem with the word sectarianism. John, I'm surprised he hasn't apologised for this tweet, because it's an absolute joke. He has immediately called it sectarian, and he's noticed that it's football fans. So he's seen sectarian football fans. What he's not seen is racist thugs. He thinks that OBFA is needed to combat sectarian football fans. And he might even be right. There might need to be another law to combat sectarian football fans. But there is legislation in place, and has been for probably over 100 years, to combat racist thugs. I want to mention as well Derek Bateman, a pro-independence journalist, who called it sectarianism. It's not. It's evidently not sectarianism, it's racism. And, this is the problem. And to have cheap digs about the OBFA, I follow a few people on Twitter who summed it up quite well. The OBFA was not to target 500 Rangers fans marching through the streets, technically illegally. It was to chap a Motherwell fan's door at 6 o'clock in the morning for swearing on a Saturday afternoon, or a Partick Thistle fan for kicking a chair or accidentally bumping into a steward. These ridiculous things that people were arrested for. It was a flawed piece of legislation. It's right to have been scrapped. And, racist songs have got nothing to do with it, to be perfectly honest.
No, they don't. And I thought it was a really poor, cheap dig to take. Move away from this a wee bit. We can always come back to it. To look now, the person that you mentioned earlier on, President Joe Biden, America is now completely done in Afghanistan. After a long, long time. First in there under President Bush, followed by President Obama, followed by President Trump, and then out under President Biden. Obviously, the start of this withdrawal was under the Trump administration. What we've seen, obviously, we saw a drone attack from America in recent days, but there's been a lot of people left behind in Afghanistan, and this is America's longest war has came to, like Vietnam, a disastrous end.
Yeah, exactly. And after thinking about it, I'd have to agree with Angela Haggerty. I think everyone who is involved in the war in Afghanistan should get together and say, anyone from Afghanistan who wants to flee from the Taliban, pick these countries and you're free to come. Now, in an ideal world, they'd be able to go to any country in the world. In my opinion, they'd be able to go to any country in the world, take refuge, live a life. Unfortunately, that's not how the world works. But with those involved in the war, America, Britain, I'm sure France were probably in there as well.
Yes,
I think they should all open their borders so that the Afghan people have free choice of which of the three countries they want to live in. It's good that they've ended one of their 7 eternal wars that they were fighting. Only 6 more to go, I suppose. But the war itself cost tens of billions, if not hundreds of billions, I think. It was a disaster from start to finish. The exit was also a disaster. I think you've seen the head of, I think it was the Pentagon, saying how much equipment they'd left behind. Surely that's incremental. You bring that out as you bring the troops out. Who is behind the planning of this? I suppose the Pentagon would have been behind the planning of this, but they're the ones condemning it. Who knows? But it's been a disaster, and all you can say is you're glad it's over. Unfortunately, the Taliban now reign supreme across all of Afghanistan, and how you combat that, I do not know.
Heavy gunfire was reported last night. The Taliban celebrated their victory. In terms of world politics in terms of Eastern politics, which we know obviously America and Britain, as well as France and other countries, are heavily involved in. With one country occupied by the Taliban, do you think there are those phone calls and fear, slowly keeping into the minds of Boris Johnson and Joe Biden now of what comes next? One bit of power over one country, what could come next?
Well, I mean, it's certainly things that they'll be thinking about. Intelligence forces will be thinking about. Whether they make the jump to Britain, the USA, I don't know. Not that they're the only countries that matter. I'd be more concerned about the countries that surround Afghanistan, what the Taliban plan to do. You never know. I mean, they'll probably be quite happy for a few years. They've waited in caves for 20 years, effectively. And now that the NATO forces have basically upped and left, they've just walked into the centre of Kabul and taken it. So they'll probably be celebrating their victory for a few months, if not a few years. But I mean, it's going to be a problem in the world stage for the next 10, 15, 20 years. And to fight a war in Afghanistan, it's just impossible. You can't possibly win. So I don't think withdrawing was a bad thing. But how you defeat these people, I don't know.
Yeah, one war, four presidents, and a complete disaster. In terms of engagement between the US specifically and Afghanistan now, where do you see this going? Because in terms of compromise between both countries and where they'll be at, I don't know where the common ground comes from. And in terms of America, there's a stereotype, a lot of people in America likes to be seen as strong in the world stage and doing, taking those ideas of freedom across the world. Patrick's dropped out for a wee minute. He will come back to join us. We'll get on with it when he comes back. Thanks for everybody that is in the comments today and tuning in. We've got some great views over the past couple of weeks, so please continue to tune in. Patrick is back. Let me get a drink there. Yeah, I was asking you there, I think, on in terms of communication between America and the Taliban, where that goes. And the stereotype I was talking about was a strong America that takes across, freedoms across the world. In terms of where Joe Biden's place is just now with this withdrawal, again, as I said, it was first started by the former President Donald Trump. But how do you think this withdrawal in these circumstances, humiliatingly, I mean, Russian media has made fun of it, obviously Taliban celebrations. But what type of picture do you think this paints of Joe Biden just now?
Well, it depends. I mean, I'd say he's done a good thing, personally. Not all of it is, I mean, the result of it definitely isn't all sunshine and rainbows. The Taliban are now in control of a massive country with a lot of weapons. So that isn't good, obviously. But I think you can't just station your troops in countries halfway around the world just to keep the peace. I think America have got problems at home. Not only that, they weren't peacekeepers, these people. They were US soldiers, and a lot of US soldiers aren't the friendliest of people. They killed innocent civilians every single year.
There was only a clip the other day at Kabul airport of a US, somebody from the US Army pushing a woman over a wall.
Was there? I never seen that.
Yeah, but just the other day.
I know there was an innocent farmer shot 2 years ago. That video resurfaced. They were chasing him down a field for absolutely no reason. Just a farmer, and they shot him dead. So, the less of these people in these countries, the better, in my opinion. Not only that, it's a complete waste of money, and it feeds the military-industrial complex. I mean, I think weapons manufacturers for the US Army have made a profit of like over 1,000% since the war started, and that's not a coincidence. So I'm hoping he pulls out of Iraq next, to be honest. But on the world stage, I think he probably has taken a bit of a blow, Joe Biden. But apart from the midterm elections next November, I don't think it really matters, because I don't think an 82-year-old Joe Biden's going to be running for re-election.
Probably not.
So he's kind of got free rein to do what he wants, because he's not got elections to think about. I know the Senate and the House are in the balance. I think it's nigh on impossible for him to keep both of those houses at the midterms next year anyway. So, I don't think his reputation probably has taken a hit, but I'm not sure how much it matters.
Yeah, it probably doesn't matter to him. Maybe to the party it matters. I don't think the Democrats will be looking too forward to 2024, but we just need to wait and see how that goes. But in terms of, I think it's 123,000 they've managed to get out of there.
That's good.
One of the suggestions that I heard in the press was that any citizen that has been left behind and not been taken, that they can travel to neighbouring countries. That has been given as a thumbs up from the Taliban, that if you're a citizen and you've not got out, you can go to a neighbouring country and then get from there. But again, no, so many blockages for people to actually do that. In terms of, if you live in Kabul and don't have a car, how are you meant to do that? There's even people saying that they need bread and water. In terms of Afghanistan as a state, looking forward maybe 5-10 years, what do you think we're going to see here?
A regression, a total regression. It's hard to say. I mean, I can't get my crystal ball out, unfortunately, but it's hard to get yourself into the heads of these people. But if they've got hundreds of thousands of people that don't want to be there, surely they'll just let them leave. I mean, obviously they're not as sympathetic as you or I, but you would think that they'd be looking for an easy path to government. They don't want, although they do, they might not want to be killing people all the time. Maybe they do. I don't know. They're all extremist murderers, so it's hard to tell. But I mean, it's good that they're letting some people go to neighbouring countries. I'm pretty sure Afghanistan's quite a large country in terms of land mass. So, I mean, if you're in the middle, or even anywhere near the middle, that's a hell of a walk. Because I don't think you'll be getting on in a car or a truck or anything. You won't be getting the public bus or whatever, But it's a hard one. It'll be sad whatever happens, because you've got absolute monsters in charge,
Mark Daly's come in the comments and he said, what is even more worrying is Kamala Harris will come in and take over. But would you be worried about that, to be the first female president of the US in 3 years' time now?
Well, it depends what Mark means by that. If Joe Biden's going to step down and she is automatically promoted without an election, I think that could happen. I don't know if I'd be happy with it. I don't know if I'd be scared by it either. She's an extremely unpopular figure in America, because she basically stands for nothing. If she is the candidate in 2024, I don't think she wins. I'll be totally honest.
I don't think she wins either. And especially if it's against Donald Trump, I don't think she wins.
No. Republicans are struggling to hold on to certain states. Texas could go blue in 2024, but not with a candidate like Kamala Harris. I think other women are more capable than running. I think it'll be, Elizabeth Warren could try again. Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez will be old enough by a couple of months by the time 2024 comes around.
Will she not, though, get the same treatment that Bernie Sanders got?
I don't think so. Around? I think she's a lot closer to people like Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and the House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. I think she plays ball more, basically. She's also openly a Democrat. Bernie Sanders for 40 years was an independent and was only a Democrat to run for president. She toes the party line a lot more. Bernie Sanders would vote against a bill, 1991, and he was the one, and he was the outsider, the outcast for all those years. Ocasio-Cortez has been there for 3 years. she's been the centre of attention for 3 years. I think she'll be more palatable to people. But I mean, yeah, my main point is that I don't think Kamala Harris will be president unless Uncle Joe steps down after falling asleep in meetings with foreign prime ministers.
Yeah, he has had some week with that. He fell asleep. He looked at his watch. Yes, there's certainly been a lot of bloopers, and
he's
it was
withdrawn from
described.
Afghanistan. He's
Yes.
fallen asleep while meeting the genocidal maniac that is the Israeli prime minister, and he's looked at his watch instead of saluting the troops. So go on, Uncle Joe.
Yes, and he was dubbed during those elections last year as Sleepy Joe.
By his opponent.
Yes, and maybe not too far off it after what we seen.
We all need a power nap now and then.
Yes, we do, but maybe not what is arguably the most powerful man or person in the world. But hey ho, COVID restrictions. Go back to Scotland and get away from the mad country that is America. We've saw cases continue to rise. I didn't actually have a chance to check what they were today. When I last looked at them, there were 7,000 odd. The press last week, there was a lot of chat in the press about a circuit breaker. There's also been options of COVID certificates, more negative tests having to be proved. Where do you see us at this point? I mean, I know that Nicola Sturgeon described us as being at a crucial point in the pandemic. Where do you see the country at this point in time, due to the fact so many people have been vaccinated?
Well, I think the highest number I've seen was 8,000 in one day. Luckily, I don't think I can't remember seeing deaths more than 10 or 11 a day, which is obviously still tragic, but without vaccines, those numbers would be so much higher, which is, testament to the vaccine, testament to, the social distancing we all stuck to last year, the fact that we didn't see those case numbers, or else hundreds, if not thousands, more people would have died. Talk of a circuit breaker, I believe it's Tuesday, maybe last Wednesday or Thursday. I'm glad it's not happening. I think psychologically, mentally, people would take such a massive hit from that. Businesses as well, would have to shut down for presumably 3 weeks. Not only that, it's hard to actually see a way out of it if we were to go for a circuit breaker, because I think something like over 80% of over 25s have had both doses. And once you're at that stage, there's not really anything you can do apart from getting on with your life. Now, I'm not saying people should be in ICU and die of this awful disease, but we're at a crossroads now where you choose to live with restrictions for the rest of our lives, or you choose to turn a new leaf and say, look, we'll wear masks, but apart from that, we need to move on. And I think that's where we're at.
If there's no circuit breaker, I hope there's no circuit breaker, because I'm in total agreement with you. In terms of the economy, but we can't keep starting. Because again, I think the only way that would ever happen is if there was to be a strand that is just not coping. The vaccine doesn't cope with.
A new vaccine.
Yeah, that is not the case just now. We still have a vaccine that works against this, and there's a worry. Obviously, I mean, there's a massive worry about NHS recovery, but at this point in time, a circuit breaker, I just don't see working. And depends on what you actually did with a circuit breaker, because again, we've so many people left behind, throughout this whole pandemic. Yeah, of course, everybody can't be included, but they can all be looked after, and that didn't really happen. So the other two options, one option particularly was vaccine certificates, something that the Republic of Ireland at this point in time are operating. It was something we spoke about months ago, before even you, and I think it was before you and I had even been double dosed with the vaccine. Could you see that being introduced in Scotland at all, or do you think there is that risk of people's freedom, that if this was to be introduced, that people wouldn't comply with it?
It's not hinging on. It's not. it's not damaging anyone's freedom. It's a trade-off. You've actually just reminded me. Ireland, you need vaccine passports because everyone's been offered it in Ireland by now, and it's the same in the UK. Everyone's had their offer. I think everyone had their offer in June actually, but you need a vaccine passport to get on a train in Ireland pretty soon,
and in Canada.
And in Canada, there you go.
Yep, that's been very recently introduced.
And obviously, unless you're an elite sports player or something, which there's questions about that ethically, but I think you need to be double dosed in order to travel as well, travel overseas. I think it's totally fair enough. The person taking you overseas is a private company. If they don't want to risk a massive insurance payout, then they're more than capable, more than willing to say no to you, and that's just the deal that you have to make. The government run the trains and the buses. And the government are the ones urging you to take your vaccine. If you don't want to take the vaccine, then they don't need to let you on their transport services. No one's freedom is being encroached upon. I think that's the right word, encroached upon. Private companies run pubs. If those private companies don't want to let you into a pub, you can't demand to be let in. If you don't want to take the vaccine, if you're willing to sacrifice all these privileges just because you don't want to take a vaccine that is totally harmless and saves lives, then that's up to you, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think, I'd be of agreement if it was between a circuit breaker and that being introduced. There will obviously be an agreement to take the vaccine certificates and see how that works. Again, though, I think context to this is very, very important. That only a couple of weeks ago, schools returned. We saw the return of nightclubs. We saw the return of pubs being open later on. Social distancing being dropped. Being able to meet as many people as you like indoors and outdoors. So I think it was always going to be the case that this would come. And again, JCVI is also looking at the 15 to 17-year-olds being vaccinated again. What that would do for schools, don't know. But again, it won't be obviously done until it's deemed safe to be put through. But there's a lot in this just now. The only worry is that come winter time, when the NHS is at that fragile point, if, and there's a big if, hospital numbers continue to increase, there probably is that slight possibility that we'll see something creeping in, isn't there?
You could reintroduce social distancing and make mask wearing mandatory. I think that would definitely prevent cases. I think, gigs would have to be cancelled and festivals would have to be cancelled, etc. Which would make things quite difficult. Football as well would have to go back to less than 50% capacity. It's a difficult balance to strike, What they could do is, raise taxes on higher earners and properly fund the health service. That would be ideal for a change. But, I think we'll probably cross that bridge when we come to it. I'm sure, I would like to think that they're planning for that eventuality, because I think we were only out of a circuit breaker 3 weeks when it got to Christmas Day, and we all went back into lockdown on Boxing Day, and cases just totally skyrocketed, thousands and thousands a day. And then while being in lockdown, they nosedived again. So, can we go into a lockdown every single New Year's? I don't know. New Year's as well. There'll be loads of New Year's parties,
And Christmas as well. I know a lot of people, they were advised not to go to family and whatever else for Christmas, but I think, that'll be 2 years for a lot of people that they've not had a proper Christmas since, so will want to spend time with their family. And again, really, is it people's own risk and whatever they do to that. And again, like the lateral flow tests are there for everybody at this point in time. They are accessible. That if you want to now, I think if I'm correct, at that point last December they weren't as accessible as they are now. Whereas now anybody living in Scotland, I think across the UK, if they want to take a lateral flow test, can. So there's also that there as a prevention to keep people safe.
Yeah, 100%. I'd encourage everyone to take lateral flow tests twice a week or just before you go out, just to see how you're doing. And if, we actually seen the First Minister, I think, on Sunday. I think it was Sunday, maybe Saturday. She was pinged and
Sunday.
therefore took a PCR and waited and isolated. She's since tested negative, but says she'll continue with the lateral flow tests. Funnily enough, she didn't find time to tweet about 500 racists chanting in the city centre of Glasgow, where she's from, but I suppose she was preoccupied. But yeah, I mean, I'd encourage everyone to do the same. Just keep testing yourself, isolate when you think you've got symptoms or when you test positive. Don't be silly. I think I've noticed, this is just anecdotal, but I've seen a drop off in masks. It would be good if everyone could wear masks a lot more. It doesn't make a difference. It's not encroaching in anyone's freedoms. It's just a mask. And when you're going indoors, just be sensible and just be sensible and wear one. I don't know about you, if you want to say anything.
No, I've been totally agreement with you. The lateral flow tests are there to be used. They are good. As somebody that's experienced COVID, if you've got it, make sure that you know you've got it so you can't pass it on to anybody else. Thankfully, I didn't. And like yourself, continue to wear your mask. I mean, it's not really much to ask whether you're in public transport or, walking out a pub or, whatever else, going up to the bar to order something. Just try and keep yourself and others protected because it's still very much there, still a part of our lives, but you can do something. And again, continue to wash your hands and use sanitizer. Probably there has been a drop off of that with people. While we're on health, just one of the things to wrap up on, we saw the government last week publish their NHS recovery plan, which details £1 billion to be spent on to improve care and tackle the backlog. Do you think that's enough? Or Annie Wells was quite critical. Scottish Tory Annie Wells was quite critical that it wasn't enough.
Well, there's two things to say here. It is a lot of money, but in terms of
that is over
spend,
5 years, of course, not just that.
So that makes it even less. £1 billion sounds like a lot of money in terms of government spending. It isn't. I think politicians use figures like this. I think the Scottish budget's something like 135 million. So £1 billion is like less than 1%. And then over 5 years, it's 200 million. So it's less than 0.2%. So when you put it in context like that, it doesn't actually sound like an awful lot at all. The problem with Annie Wells is Annie Wells was saying that they would spend more, but she couldn't give an explanation of how they would raise more money. And the reality is
taxes for a start.
Oh no, the reality is they probably wouldn't spend more. They're just having a cheap political shot. And if they were to spend more, they would cut other services. So Annie Wells is just a complete hypocrite, and the interview was an absolute disaster, as it tends to be when Annie Wells does interviews. But £1 billion over 5 years, it's good. Will it be enough? I don't know.
Yeah, and again, we don't know because the backlog is horrendous. There's, as we said, in terms of winter, and different, different NHSs across Scotland, from different parts of the NHS Tayside, Glasgow and Clyde, whatever else.
The 7 boards, yeah.
Yep, we'll have different points in the pandemic in terms of hospitalisations and where they're at in terms of staff and everything else. That backlog, it's not, it's not as if we can just go, there's COVID to one side, let's tackle the backlog now, because it's still there and it's still going to need to have a priority on it. So, again, it's something that's probably going to need to be examined next, because it can't be something that is set in stone. Anything you'd like to say before we wrap up?
Just quickly back on that, when it comes to the backlog, I mean, I'm sure you probably have heard this phrase. If you didn't learn about it in school, I learned about it in modern studies, the postcode lottery. Sometimes if you think you have cancer, maybe you'll be sent for a scan, and if you live in another postcode, because of lesser funding, you won't be sent for a scan. And these are life and death decisions based on how much money the government thinks it wants to spend. And things like that have been happening for years before the pandemic, right the way back to the 1980s. So I can only imagine what it was like during the pandemic. People, if they weren't scared to go to hospital, maybe put it off, or we're sent away, we're full, we're busy. And how many people were missed? How many,
Loads of people.
people feeling heart palpitations, people feeling lumps, people just not feeling quite right. And how many of those people are now, have already died or, beyond saving? It's a scary prospect to think about. It's probably in the thousands. And the catch-up programme, the fact it's over 5 years as well, that doesn't help anyone that should have been diagnosed 2 months ago. If they're getting seen in 3 years, they're probably going to be dead in 3 years. So,
Or with those minor surgery that people have to go in for as well, whether it's knee replacements, hip replacements, yes, a routine, but the pain that the people can be in through that and might have been through it for the past 18 months may be horrendous. They might not even be able to get outside for all we know or walk, but yet still can't get their operation done.
Not only that, before this, I think, is it CAMS that's the government mental health programme? That was a 6 to 12 month wait, and this is a 6 month wait for people who are openly suicidal. So can you imagine people who have felt depressed, anxious? There'll be people who have, effectively lived like hermits for 18 months, might be afraid to leave their homes. I don't mean to be disrespectful when I say this, by the way. It's just what comes to mind, the word use. But, there's going to be so many mental health as well as physical health problems. And over the next 5 years, you'd like to see, I don't know how the 200 million extra will go, but I'd like to have seen more, probably. But let's hope it works.
Yeah, we'd all like it to work. We'd like people to feel a bit healthier if they're feeling down, that they can seek help and get it right away and not have to wait and listen if people are in pain that they can get seen to. But again, something that we'll cover, something that we'll keep an eye on. And we've also got, I don't know if we touched on that last week, we've also got the inquiry that's going to be starting in terms of COVID, in terms of looking at the whole thing and how it was tackled and where the problems lay and where people went wrong. But it'll be very, very interesting to see that published. But thanks to everybody for joining us in the comments. Hopefully next week we'll be back with a guest. But thanks to everybody for tuning in. And we'll wrap up there. Thank you for watching The State of Politics.
Thank you.